Hi, I'm Kaitlin Garcia-Maestas, and I am the Curator and Director of Exhibitions at Socrates Sculpture Park. Today we are going to take a tour of our latest exhibition that just opened a few weeks ago that is called the Socrates Annual 2023. So let's take a walk.
We come to our first piece here in the foreground with the East River in the background. What is this piece called?
This piece is called Imagine Fungal Emergence, and it's by the artist Rusek. It is an incredible hanging sculpture because not only does it support itself from the trees and has a beautiful waterfront view behind it, but it's also made with recycled aluminum blinds. So each of the blinds have been rolled and affixed to another one, and through the support of each component it gains its strength. One of my favorite elements of this work is that when it's windy outside or we have a little bit of movement in the trees, the piece itself actually starts to move and has sound. Which is a really unexpected and beautiful quality of the material, which again was made of all recycled materials that were sourced in New York City. So one of the themes of this exhibition this year was we invited artists to think about the idea of transformation, and specifically the history of the transformation of this park, which was initially a landfill and then became a park through community support and community volunteering in 1986. And so the park has undergone a number of transitions over time, but also we're inviting artists to think about the transformation of materials themselves. So here you see that in that we have a material that once served a purpose inside someone's home and is now being used to make an artwork.
A really impressive artwork that must have taken a lot of time to put together. Can you talk about the process? Where was this work created?
Yeah, so the fellowship, the Socrates Annual, is the culminating exhibition of the Socrates Fellowship, which happens every year. And this year we had 6 fellows. Each of those fellows came and worked at the park throughout the summer. So they were fabricating their works on site in our open air studio, which is also an amazing opportunity for artists to get to know our visitors, to really spend time in the park and understand the landscape. And through that experience, it informs ultimately the final work. So this piece is obviously very much informed by the experience artists had in the park. Kate is also an artist who lives very close by, and she has referred to this piece as her love letter to Socrates, which is really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. And what's going on next door to the park?
Yeah, so behind this piece are some elements that belong to Mark Ndivhuho, who's a very well-known artist, and he was the founder of Socrates Sculpture Park. So the history of Socrates really came out of an artist's vision, and an artist's vision to create open space for other artists to create sculptures and site-specific artworks.
Okay, so how many pieces do we have on view here this fall?
On view, we have 5 works, 5 installations. I don't say sculptures because they're not, as you can see and as we'll walk through, they're not necessarily standalone sculptures. A lot of them have various elements that create an overall immersive experience, which is sort of curator talk for a work that sort of encompasses multiple perspectives and asks you to move and navigate with your body throughout the work.
Simone is watching and she loves this place, and she's making recommendations that if you come visit Socrates Sculpture Park, you should also visit the Ndivhuho Museum.
Yes.
You want to tell us more about where we are?
Sure, yeah. So we are in Long Island City, Astoria, kind of right on the edge between the 2 neighborhoods. And we are along the East River. So if you look across, you'll see Roosevelt's Island and also the Upper East Side. So we have an incredible view that artists are really inspired by in their work, because we have, of course, this urban architecture coupled with a very beautiful natural landscape, which is a really unique and exciting site for artists to think about and conceive new works in conversation with. But yeah, this neighborhood is incredibly special. We have Ndivhuho just a couple blocks away. We also have a ferry stop. So anyone can get here pretty easily along the East River. And yeah, we're really fortunate, honestly. This is a dream place to come to work every day.
And as a visitor to Socrates Sculpture Park, which I have been many times, one of the things that I appreciate most is, that there's always something new here. Twice a year, things get changed up. And I love to photograph the pieces with the river and the skyline in the back. And I feel like the piece takes that view into consideration usually.
Yes, definitely. And it also has an interesting conversation with scale. So one of the exciting challenges for an exhibition like this, which is inviting emerging early career artists to oftentimes make their first artwork in an outdoor setting, and definitely in New York City, that's a really unique and special opportunity for emerging artists. But one thing I always tell artists is to think about the scale around you. And so when you take a work, even that's made on site, but in the studio, which has a contained structure, it has a roof overhead, and you put it in an open air setting like this, works that might feel really large in person start to shrink because we're dealing with these amazing but massive scale buildings, water, the trees. So it is a really fun and exciting challenge for me to navigate as a curator. And you'll see that as we walk through the show, that a lot of the works are dealing with different elements of scale and inviting you to have an intimate experience, at a human scale, but also invite a larger perspective and, really ask you to step back and see them in conversation with everything that's happening behind them.
Yeah, let's take a look at more of the pieces on view as of last week, right? This is the brand new show.
Yes. Opened on October 1st after a one-day delay because of the flood.
All right, what do we have here?
Yeah, so this project was actually made by two artists that applied to the fellowship as a collective, Ashley Harris and Ndivhuho Rasengani. And these are kinetic sculptures. So kinetic means that they move or they respond to wind and elements. So a few of these components actually move. I'll spin one for you so you can see. They're really fun. And these works were, again, all made on site. But what's really special about this project is that Ashley and Ndivhuho worked with a lot of elements that are from the park itself. And the work is inspired by, again, the history of Socrates, but thinking about the indigenous history and really zooming out and thinking of the larger period of time in which we've all been here, or the park has been here. And so these sculptures are made with recycled scrap metal that is part of, at Socrates we have a lot of scrap metal because of course we fabricate sculptures, and sometimes the sculptures travel and go other places, but sometimes the artist will also recycle the materials or offer them up for another artist to use for sculpture, which is, I think, a really beautiful collective and communal experience that we have here.
Passing the torch, in a way.
Yes, passing the torch, exactly. Or we also just have scraps that are left over from other sculptures we fabricated. So we have an incredible scrap rack of materials that are free for artists to use. And they incorporated some of those elements. The wood panels are burned wood, so that's how you get that black effect. They actually torched the wood on site. And they both have a glass making practice within their work, and so these globes are made of hand-blown glass, which is also really special to have in an outdoor setting. Glass is often considered sometimes to be a little too delicate to have outdoors, so I think it's a really ambitious project for them to be able to experiment with all of these materials in a unique and new setting.
All right, as we make our way around the park to the next piece, can you tell us how much admission is to Socrates Sculpture Park?
Socrates is free, and we're open every day of the year, even on Christmas. So the park opens early in the morning, usually around 8 a.m., and we close at sunset.
I imagine dog walkers are the first ones out every day.
Yes, some of our, most devoted visitors are four-legged creatures.
Our critics, our fans.
Yeah, connoisseurs.
All right, I'm gonna zoom out for the dramatic reveal, because this I really love the way that this plays with the skyline.
Yes. This is another work that's really thinking about multiple perspectives. And you can also walk through it. Pretty cool. It sort of acts like a portal into different perspectives of the park. So this material, if you look, these are bathtubs.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
I actually really didn't realize that.
Yeah, transformation, right? And that's what it's all about, is being able to take these unlikely, unexpected materials and put them in an outdoor setting and call it sculpture, which it absolutely is. So this project is by Rivlin, who is an artist who often uses recycled and found materials within her work. And these bathtubs are really like your everyday standard bathtub that are, ubiquitous within households, similar to Kate's mini blinds, right? And what's really amazing about these is she also sourced them in New York City. Mostly were free or recycled, and transformed them into this incredible sculpture.
It's also funny the way they're all from different places, but they are the standard size with only a couple variations, so they can fit together in this symmetrical piece.
Exactly, and I think one thing that Ba'ami shared with me, the artist, is that these bathtubs are often considered like the standard human size, but of course we all know that humans range in size. And so these kind of interesting elements that come out of our consumer marketplace, where we sort of make these assumptions or say that something is standard. Well, what is standard, right?
Indeed. All right. This piece is almost hard to believe that it's temporary, because it looks like it's been there for eternity.
Yes. And actually, that's what the work is about. So Maryam Turkey, who's the artist who made this work, is from Iraq. And the piece is really inspired by the architecture that she experienced as a child growing up in Baghdad. And Maryam is really interested in the idea of sort of reclaiming or bringing these architectural elements to New York City and, making them part of her world today. But I think what's really fun about this project is Maryam described her experience, growing up in Baghdad and looking at these materials, that you would often see human fingerprints within the mud, within the earthen material. And she really wanted her work to also have the presence of human touch, and for it to feel tactile. And I think what was really surprising for all of us at the opening a couple weeks ago is, as soon as we had children here, they immediately ran to the work and started climbing and touching it. And it's almost as though children really feel an innate connection to this, which is such a beautiful metaphor for what Maryam was trying to create with this work, which is really referencing her own childhood, her own experience, and the playfulness of architecture. And she described the architecture that she grew up with, and it felt like puzzle pieces to her, and she would think about them like puzzle pieces and almost like blocks. And I think a lot of the children at the park also have a similar experience with the architecture.
And then the building technique was, I imagine, recreated?
Yeah, so she used traditional lathing. So within earthen architecture, you often provide a layer and then you add stucco. And that was the process that she used for this.
And so if you were in the park while she was making it, you could have seen that happening.
Yes. And she was here most of the summer, working on the sculpture. So I think a lot of our visitors did get to see the transformation. One of the best parts for me was when she added the final red pigment, because the work was gray for a long period of time, and then a week before the opening she added the final pigment layer, which transformed it to this really bright, beautiful red structure.
It looks spectacular in contrast to the blue sky we have today.
Yeah. And again, I think thinking about these sort of elements of scale, so there's parts of the structure that are really low to the ground, and again, I think that's really attractive to a toddler or a small human, right? And then there are those taller pieces that are large scale and capture elements of the architecture behind it. So it's really in direct conversation with all of these structures at different scales.
All right, and here
we might have a great example, right?
Someone's going to prove you right. All right, let's immerse ourselves in this immersive piece.
Well, this is a really great piece as well. I mean, they all are. They're all my favorites for different reasons. This work is made with recycled Phragmites, which is a European reed grass that is considered an invasive species in New York City and in New York City parks. And Stefania Urist, who's the artist, worked closely with multiple different New York City parks to acquire these materials. These are materials that the parks wanted to remove because they are invasive, and she really transformed them into almost like a fence-like structure. And they're hand woven in the steel wire that she herself did. Stefania was pregnant throughout the entire installation period, and when she was installing, she was in her last month of pregnancy, which was really incredible to see her out here. She's like a super mom. And her children, she has two other children, also helped her weave these fences, and she worked with a number of collaborators as well, both at the park and then at other parks where she acquired the material, and at Socrates too.
It's fall, and it almost feels like a corn maze, right? But it's made out of an entirely different type of plant.
And the maze-like configuration is inspired by a New York waterways map. So when you look at a waterways map of the East River, you see all of these kind of different channels and divisions, and Stefania reproduced that here. So on the label there's a map that shows you what she's referencing, but the experience is to think about not just the material and the history of the material, which is, as I mentioned, invasive, but also an incredible plant for water resiliency and helps in floods. So when we had a flood during the installation, this piece was like super happy, and they have an amazing photo of the water, which is like up to here, and these plants were, right at home. So it's a complex plant in that it's both invasive, but also does have benefits for waterfront sites and waterfront locations. And Stefania is really asking us to kind of think about this idea of what is invasive and who gets to determine what plants stay and what plants go in the city and parks. And
on the waterfront.
And on the waterfront, exactly.
Well, speaking of corn mazes, why don't you tell us what's coming up?
Sure. Our next and kind of final event for the season is our Halloween harvest. So we'll have pumpkin carving, we'll have a pumpkin catapult, and it's one of our largest, most well-attended events that we have every year. It's on October 28th. We also have a dog costume contest, which I've been told is the second largest in New York City, though we'd like to be the largest. So please, if you have a pet, bring your pet. We'd love to see your pet's best Halloween costume, and it's just really a fun gathering to really bring everyone together one last time before we get into those cooler months.
Thank you, Kaitlin, for the invitation and for showing us around Socrates Sculpture Park today.
Yes, thank you all, and please come join us. We are open every day of the year. You can reach us by ferry, by bus, by train. Bring your family and bring a picnic. Thanks.
Leave everyone with one last view of the park. Thanks for joining us. I'm Adrienne, and I'll see you in the park.